Hi guys, and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show. We help Muslims and non-Muslims alike to understand and handle Islam in the 21st century. We consider ourselves to be decent human beings, so we condemn categorically any abuse, oppression, misogyny, slavery, violence, anything like that. We do embrace, however, free speech and also criticism, even if it is directed at us, if it is factual and constructive criticism. We focus on Islam exclusively. So if you're curious about anything Islam, you've come to the right place. Now, we don't attack, which is aggressive, destructive, and antagonistic, neither Islam nor Muslims. We ask questions and show facts. We refute false claims and present the reality of Islam, which is political Islam. We inspect, investigate, research, analyze, and then report and critique on Islam, the ideology, not the people. Now, the live stream goes to YouTube and Facebook, and there are three ways that you can participate in this. Either you join us in the live written chat, you can join the panel during the live show, or later on watch and comment the archive. And anyone can join to comment, critique, contribute, or question. This is not a Dawa channel with censorship. Don't go to Patreon, don't go to PayPal. Everything here is free. The way we work is usually we have some news, some Krazy Komments, a segment where we go and read the Quran, and then a discussion on the theme of the month, followed by integrating the live chat, ending with a Hadith of the week. If this is not enough Islam for you, there's still the Discord channel where you can discuss with us without anything being recorded. See you later and enjoy the Gin and Tonic Show. Hello. We've already got one dislike. That's a good one. Thank you very much for your attention. Good evening, ladies, gents, and others. It is the Gin and Tonic Show. Welcome to another Friday evening where we discuss Islam, where we help you understand the ins and outs of Islam. Thank you very much for the panel. You can see we're like in full swing now, and we expect maybe even more people today. We'll see. Welcome to the panel. Welcome to the chat. Good evening. Let's start with, on the bottom right, we have Mr. Mr. Thunderpants. Welcome to you, sir.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the show, and welcome to my co-panelists, and also to the guest appearance tonight of from In the Nick of Time. Hello to you, and welcome to the panel this evening.
And Mr. Speakers, how's things going
good
over
evening,
on the
gentlemen,
broken
good evening,
island?
viewers, and good evening, Stops, and welcome, as I say, Eka Thunderous. Good evening and welcome to the panel In the Nick of Time. All good. Looking forward to a good show. Had a few interesting discussions here and there over the week, either on Discord or on online. So looking forward to one tonight.
This line was from Nadia Ahmed. Yeah, he's been on the show. I think only once. And well, he didn't do too well, whatever. And thank you very much, Nick, in the Nick of Time. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Nick is going to give us a short presentation later on, because he is, let's say he has a scientific background, and what he thought he could do is contribute something to the topic, and this is most welcome. Welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show, Nick.
Thank you for having me on.
Brilliant stuff, thank you. And don't worry, if you want to say something, just chip in. I mean, this is not a Dawa channel. This is not somewhere, where everybody is censored or something. If you have something to say, you just go ahead and say it, okay?
Yeah, surely.
Brilliant. Okay, then, as we heard, we sort of have a structure where we go through different things. So what I thought I'm going to do is what I call the inspiration of the month. Remember, we don't only bash Islam, we also make sure that we have positive aspects. And this is something which I think is quite positive. The inspiration of the week is do not lose hope nor be sad. Straight from the Quran. Very nice inspiration, I think. Brilliant stuff.
Although it has to be said, though, Stops, I think that's pretty self-explanatory and, straightforwardly obvious if one thinks about it. So I agree that that is a good comment, but it's like a trivially true comment in that sense. I mean, that's what we'd all strive to be anyway. So it doesn't particularly make it any better that it comes from, a book at a certain point in time. I'm sure humans had that idea before and have had it since, and have had it in places where they've never heard of any of these things.
It was abrogated.
Come on, guys. I thought I found something nice, and now you destroyed it.
Well, we're not denying it's nice, what we are saying, though, but it's trivially nice. It's like, and I say unto you, you should breathe air if thou wants to live more than 7 minutes. Yes, it's trivially obvious that would be useful if you wish to survive. And it is a good thing, true, but it's a trivial statement. So I think, it is good, but it's trivially good. So there we go, at least in my view.
Okay, and welcome to the chat. The same goes to anyone in the chat. If anybody wants to say something, if somebody wants to ask something, please do go right ahead. And if you want to catch our attention, the usual one enter, that is sure to get our attention. Thank you very much for being with us. It's good to see that there are people who are interested in the topic. It's good to see that there are people who are in here, and it's much, much appreciated. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to jump straight into the next segment, and I forgot to advertise it, didn't I? I didn't put this. We're now going to be talking.
It's puzzling. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this before.
And of course I played the wrong one first.
You gotta love it.
Actually, it's supposed to say Koran Korner, and somehow I never got around to doing that, so I just called it the same crazy, just used different colors to generate this. Yes, Thunderpants is thunderous indeed. So it's Krazy Komments. I'm very sorry about that, but it is Krazy Korner. Here you go. The Krazy comment number one comes from a fan from, I don't know, there's something in Liverpool. I suppose Thunderous could talk and tell us something about this. But what is quite funny is the comment is the bad ideas you are talking about are false. Because true Islam is peaceful. I promise you will regret making these videos.
Now, as someone who's Indian, I know Gandhi had peaceful protests, so hopefully he's trying to do something similar.
Yeah,
and hopefully he's doing it with just one you and not you.
Hello, guys.
Hi, Mustafa. Welcome.
Hi. Welcome. You guys can hear me, correct?
Yes, we hear you.
Perfect.
Loud and clear. Actually, better than usual, because normally you have this background microphone. Did you make an investment?
Oh, I am actually plugged in my earphones, so I think that may be the case.
Oh, excellent. Well, congratulations. Coming through
Definitely
loud.
Coming through loud. Yep.
Oh, wow. Loud and clear. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, so I will regret making these videos. Okay,
you and you, Stops. The two of you.
Yeah, the both of us. Why do atheists or enemies of Islam? I don't know. I thought we're all created by the same God. So a God created enemies of Islam so that this God can then punish the enemies of Islam who think that Islam is not so convincing, or I don't know how this works. So anyway, these enemies of Islam think Muslims cannot use science. We use the Quran as our filter. We can point at verses in the Quran to show we affirm scientific progress. Now,
isn't that an apt statement? And we have time who will hopefully show us why that statement is not correct if we put it.
Yeah, I think that's why you guys invited me.
Exactly.
So the funny thing is I should be a prophet because I selected this before I knew that Nick was going to come on today. Can you believe it? So
prophecy has been fulfilled.
I think there's also a misstatement there, right? Which is, we're not saying that Muslims can't use science. What I'm saying, I won't speak for you guys, you may or may not agree, is that science and the Quran are not compatible. Not that a Muslim cannot use science. A Muslim could go, okay, I'm going to, undertaking a scientific investigation and put aside my belief in the Quran while I'm doing that. Nobody's saying that can't happen. But what we are suggesting is that science and the Quran are irreconcilable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if a Muslim then uses the Quran, then obviously this doesn't work. There's a clash.
Then you have Zakir Naik.
Are you mentioning Zakir Naik?
Or Ahmed Nadir, right?
And that too. And him too, yeah.
Okay. Now, this is quite funny. Jalalain also believes the Quran says earth is flat. And now, this is what critical and rational thinking does to you, because now Shuaib Muhammad says, why is flat earth even a valid scholarly opinion if it's wrong? And that is exactly the question that we need to ask ourselves. So here we have the clash. Now, I have no reason to doubt that both of them are Muslims. If they are, it shows me that there are discrepancies within the thinking or within the models that are being applied within Islam. So one Muslim says, well, believes Quran says earth is flat, so what do we do about this? And the other one says, well, why is it a scholarly opinion? And he asks exactly the right question, which is in contradiction to, of course, chapter 5, number 101, where he says, don't ask questions if you are afraid of the answer. But this is exactly the question.
There's also something else there. Shaib, if I've pronounced that correctly, is also suggesting that, in fact, it's not scholars that they should appeal to, but the latest scientific information. And if Shaib was consistent, well, then we don't really need scholars for anything other than their personal interpretation of what certain non-scientific verses would say. So I think he's got to be a bit careful going down that route if it's to suggest it's wrong. Well, how does he know it's wrong? Not because the Quran says so, but because science has found that out. And if he were to use that standard in all other inquiries, that could be quite uncomfortable, I think, if he were to go down that route. So he's got to be very careful with just sort of stepping out there, because he is actually appealing to something that isn't the Quran in order to suggest that it's wrong.
And this is exactly the result.
I like this comment. Is the earth round or flat? Muhammad hijab. Yes.
Exactly.
What he actually said, because
this is the problem.
I did too, is that you can have two valid interpretations. And then the question, of course, quite obviously, the very next question is, what does it mean to be a valid interpretation? Does it mean that anything that some scholar can appeal to because the book is so vague is valid? Or does valid mean something that matches reality? And if it matches reality, then you can only have one valid interpretation. And if it doesn't match reality and it's purely subjective according to their opinion about what something might say, well, then you can have multiple, quote, valid interpretations. But that also means essentially that if there's contradictory opinions, how does one establish which is in fact, quote, the true one? If valid isn't synonymous with true, then how do you establish what is in fact true?
And not only that, this even challenges the Quran and stating that it has numerous times stated it's clear. But then, as examples have shown, there are so many conflicting interpretations that it practically fails that standard.
And I think this is the reason why somebody invented the term cognitive dissonance, because this is what you need to get to this, I think. Okay, this one is... Now, this is so fitting. If there is, in fact, an interpretation agreed upon by the Salaf as-Salih, in other words, the companions of Muhammad, and by the scholars of the time, why don't we just stick to that? And if there isn't, then just say Allahu Alam, God knows best, and move on. There you have it.
He has a point.
It's so easy.
I just want to say this stops, as always, one of my... I wonder if this comes up correctly. No, that's not the correct one. This one here, does that come up correctly now? Is that one showing? No, it doesn't show. I wanted to bring up, and because I've got so many windows here. Okay, I'll have to stop that. I apologize. Oh, I took yours out by mistake. Sorry, stops. I wanted to bring up this one. Maybe I have to bring it up separately because it was exactly what somebody was just mentioning, and it's one of my... I do have a favorite verse every so often.
The 138.
No. It's this one here, which is this. 12:111. Bury this in your mind, or remember this. There was certainly in their stories a lesson for those of understanding. Never was the Quran narration invented, but a confirmation of what came before it and a detailed explanation of all things and guidance and mercy for people who know. Or if you take Yusuf Ali, a detailed exposition of all things and a guide and mercy to any such that believe. That is just such a wonderful verse that utterly makes the Quran, or indeed apologists like hijab and others, it's just like a nosedive, and they impact solid earth, and it's just like, when you hit something, there's this kind of explosion.
You can hear the next now.
Yeah, and it's interesting that this verse comes in Surah Yusuf, chapter 12, which is the only chapter that even tells a flowing story. But even that story is not as very detailed as it is in the preceding biblical literature. So, if anything, like this, even chapter 12 itself is potentially a fabricated tale of its own. And, by that standard, like the Quran's basically contradicting itself in chapter 12, verse 111.
Wow.
Yeah, because there are other places, of course, where it says there are some verses that are clear and some that are ambiguous.
Chapter 3, verse 7, yeah.
Yeah, and so that it had to say that because clearly there's verse. But it's not only that it's ambiguous, of course, as we know, there's some verses that no human even understands. And that, again, seems to me to be an outright contradiction with a claim that this is a detailed book and it's a message for all people. If you send a message for all people, then it seems straightforwardly, obviously clear that if you put something in there that no human can understand, and they can only speculate about, then clearly you're contradicting yourself. But I wouldn't expect, most or if any Muslims to actually think about it and take it on board.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to add is, as someone from a science background, not actually, or if there is no textbook out here actually in the scientific field, none of my physics or calculus books say any of our books are guidelines for us to follow for our entire lifetime, because if there is any other scientific contradictory evidence that we can disprove this current textbook with, then we will change the textbook. That's how the editions change. But if we are saying that the Quran itself, according to what it says, is something that cannot change because it is supposed to guide us, then that does bring a very detrimental issue for us.
Yeah, I mean, it would be fine, of course, if it precisely and perfectly matched reality, because presumably there's certain parts of reality that don't change. And if it did very clearly and precisely detail that, then we could look at the Quran and go, okay, that's extraordinary, that's amazing. But what do we get instead? And I think we all know the answer to that one.
Okay, and Mustafa, if you say something, just yes, you need to get away from that microphone. It's so loud. You're bursting my ears.
How about now?
It's a little bit better because it's incredible. It's incredibly loud. I don't know why, but everybody else, because I just compared it to Nick, and this was quite normal volume. But when you come, it's like wow.
It stops if he unmutes himself. I can edit his mic settings on our end here. So if you click on those three little dots on anybody's picture, we as hosts can actually edit the mic settings. So just unmute for a moment, Mustafa, while Stops goes on to the next one.
Okay, and this is, really, I should be a prophet. Did somebody mention the name? As soon as you mention the name, here you have it. So Dr. Zakir Naik says certainly that ayat is a reference to the Big Bang Theory. Now, this is hijab, okay? This is a video that hijab made. And somebody says, Naik says that this ayat is a reference to the Big Bang. You mean to say you know better than Dr. Zakir Naik? This is asking hijab, okay? In a recent interview with Dr. Yasir Qadhi, he was mocking Hamza Tsortis and co. for revoking their positions on the scientific miracles of the Quran. What you have to say about that, or what do you have to say about this? So somebody is actually questioning hijab for his position and how this fits together with what Tsortis and those people are saying, that you should not go and take anything scientific as a yardstick because you're obviously and automatically going to come short.
What's your response to that?
So there is no response. I wonder what hijab is going to respond to that. I have no idea.
Keep an eye out and go back there and see if the if the comment is still there later, it might just miraculously disappear, as other critical comments seem to do.
I gotta ask as well. Isn't Dr. Zakir Naik a medical doctor? Why is he?
Dubious.
That's what he claims he is.
Yeah, it's a bit dubious. I'm not sure I'd go there if my life was in danger.
Yeah, but why is he talking about the Big Bang Theory when he's a medical doctor, as he puts it?
Well,
No, because he's stepping
also
outside
a
of his
geologist.
field of expertise, and because there's a lot of gullible people who just nod along, that sort of gives him an impetus to keep talking nonsense on things that he has no clue about. If nobody disagrees or he doesn't allow the disagreement, then he gets the idea that he's actually saying something useful or truthful.
So then he's hiding behind intellectual gatekeeping, but because he is a doctor, let's assume that he is a doctor, most of the audience are going to go by what he says because he's got some kind of educational foundation or platform in which to have an opinion that other people are going to take credibility from, and those who challenge the narrative that don't have that kind of standard of education are going to be seen as imbeciles, because how do you dare take on somebody of that educational standard or academic achievement or position in society? Because you have to bear in mind, a doctor in India is going to have quite a high stature in local communities for their medical or academic achievement, which not necessarily as much in the Western world, but more so in places like India, Pakistan, and the Far East. It's what's known as intellectual gatekeeping.
Maybe I can ask
that makes him an expert on geology and oceanography and meteorology and everything. Yeah.
Maybe I can ask a question of the panel to think about, and maybe somebody in the chat who's listening. Is there an informal fallacy which is similar to appeal to authority, but it's like appeal to authority in parallel, meaning that because somebody has, in inverted commas, an authority in one particular field, people then automatically have the idea or are lulled into the, I think, false, or at least potentially false idea that person then might have expertise in another field. So if you had a doctor, let's say Dr. MD, medical doctor, and you had, I don't know, just somebody who is a gardener, and they were both talking about cosmology, I think we probably would agree that for some reason, people are going to take the medical doctor as maybe more authoritative, even if all things being equal and they spoke in the same way and same tone and all the rest of it. I would suggest, I'd love to be able to test this, that people would most likely take the MD as opposed to the gardener if they were talking about a topic of which neither of them were an expert, purely because the MD has an expertise in another field. And I'm wondering whether there is like a fallacy like that, like an appeal to authority, but a parallel authority or authority in another field. So if somebody can come up with a good fallacy or tell us if there is such a thing, that'll be interesting.
Can't you take equivocation?
What's that?
Can't you take equivocation?
Not sure if you'd use that one because it's more appealing to somebody's authority. I mean, it's kind of equivocation in the sense that you're equivocating with him being a particular expert in one field and not being one in another.
Exactly.
So a combination of that, I suppose, and some sort of appeal to authority.
Yeah, it's definitely appeals to authority. At least that's what fits.
Yeah, but parallel authority, yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and I also think it's just a lack of general education in the first place, because if you are really a professional in a certain field with some sort of actual education, you will not claim that you know anything about another field. So if you are coming in as, like, best example is me, I'm from an electrical engineering background. I did study biology because I did try specializing in biomedical engineering, and I had to take chemistry and all that, but no way will you actually get me to start talking about civil engineering or mechanical engineering. So it's just not something that someone who actually studied a professional degree for will actually do, trying to delve into other areas of subjects. So I just think it's an overall lack of education and also equivocation of that.
Can I just comment on what Nick's just said there? What Nick has said there is actually quite real, because I've read many articles, particularly on people who are brain surgeons or have studied neurology, and their comments have always been that when you're talking with somebody that studied neurology or brain surgery and such, they tend to stick around talking about the subjects that they know, that they're experienced on. You will not find them talking about how to do the plumbing or how to do landscaping in the garden, because they recognize they're not capable of having those kind of conversations, having opinions on it, because they know nothing about it. And the phrase was, these are the people that make the world tick, the brain surgeons don't. So what Nick was saying is actually has a reality, depending on the community that you live in as well, I think has an influence. In the Western world, you might not find that so prominent where a person has an intellectual achievement, like an academic achievement, or a position of authority where they exercise that achievement of authority in another field. But you might find that that actually exists more in a third world country because the audience or your peers are of a lesser standard of education and are more susceptible to that influence. And I think it plays on the ego as well. Whereas in the Western world, even though a person can be educated to a high standard, those other people in the community that may not have that level of academic achievement are not necessarily stupid, naive, or gullible. And I don't think they're susceptible to that or are as impressionable as people in other countries may be, like in India with Zakir Naik.
Yeah, and also in like overall, like in something like Canada, because almost everything is licensed, especially in engineering. It's not just I'll be socially outcasted, but if me as an electrical engineer starts talking about civil engineering, I might lose my license for malpractice. So there are severe consequences, which is why I don't think you see many people doing that here, even though in India, there's more engineering graduates than there are people in Canada, where I live. You still see this kind of issue.
Then let's move to the next segment, which this time really is.
It's puzzling. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this before.
So this is the Koran Korner, where we look at sentences in the Quran and we go and just read them and see what happens. Now, I've done some homework this week. Yes, I have. I know it's very unusual, but I have, and I've actually gone ahead a bit.
Stops. I've noticed that for the past few weeks you haven't been forwarding the material that we're covering for the week. You've been
correct
in this area.
Yeah, I forgot this. This is true. Come on, I'm so proud that I actually did it. And now you're finding a flaw in the beer because I did. Normally I do this. I forward this to everybody so everybody knows and can sort of prepare. Well, it's not really preparation, but if there are things that somebody needs to clarify, then they have the chance to do so. And this time I did not. I apologize profusely, and I will send them around again. So what we did is we stopped on 70 last time, I think, where we said we were just joking around. Were you mocking Allah, the Messenger? Don't make excuses. You just were hypocrites. Don't obey. They will burn forever. Those before you were richer, stronger losers. Haven't you heard of destruction and genocide by Allah, who was not wrong? They were. So we are in chapter 9, and we have reached sentence number 71. And we can go because now I was so good. I went all the way up to 100, so we can stop whenever and just postpone until next week or whenever. I noticed I can go a little bit bigger still. Oh goodness, now I've lost it again. Why doesn't this stupid program remember where I was? Here we go. All right, chapter 9, sentence number 71. Now let me explain. And I think it was sentence number 74. What I do is I take a sentence from the Quran. Now, if I go and look at chapter 9, number 74, you will see this is like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, I don't know how many lines. But there's a lot of, I don't know, just bubble and just waffling. So I'm taking the essence and I'm saying, okay, this is what I understand what the Quran is trying to tell us. So in sentence number 71, I think it says believers obey, do right, pray, donate. So this is what believers do. Now, if I go to the sentence in 71 itself, you will see that this is a lot longer and it has a lot more. I think Rob was just trying to bring up the sentence.
I'm trying to share it, yeah. if I can just find the right one. I've got so many tabs, and when you go in, it doesn't actually show. I'll just do it this way.
I have the Quran. Oh, okay, there we go.
Yeah, I'll just do it by screen rather than by a tab.
No.
The believing men and the believing women are allies of each other. They enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong, and establish prayer and give zakat and obey Allah and His Messenger. Those Allah will have mercy upon them. Indeed, Allah is exalted, mighty, and wise. Yusuf Ali, the same basic thing. The believers, men and women, are protectors of one another. They enjoin what is just and forbid what is evil. They observe regular prayers, practice regular charity, and obey Allah and His Messenger. On them will Allah pour out His mercy, for Allah is exalted in power and wise. Quick question for you. Why would Allah need to pour on mercy? If you are doing what you are told, why would you need mercy? Presumably, normally mercy is put forth when you've done something, quote, wrong, and where you would otherwise be judged, mercy would be put forward. So why would you need to pour out mercy if they're doing what they are being told? That presumably mercy is not designed for those people. It's designed for people who are not doing what they're told, and then you present some mercy. So I don't know, maybe you guys can explain that to me. It just popped out to me.
I think it's more of a
Muslim.
Yeah, I think it's basically because, you're constantly it's a more of a reminder that Allah is merciful. So it's sort of like one of those patterns where the Quran repeats itself, and it's saying that Allah is merciful, and sort of like you're still living in a sort of like a fear of Allah. Itself is seen as a virtue in Islam.
Yeah,
it's like saying, I'm going to pass you a towel. And you say, yeah, but hang on, I'm not wet. I don't need a towel.
I think it's why one has to bear in mind that it says that, very similar to what Mustafa was saying, it's a perpetual, constant recognition that Allah is showing mercy on you. So it's designed to remove complacency and, if you like, take it for granted. So the constant reminder there, because if you look at the very next line, it goes, and obey Allah and His Messenger. So it's that constant reminder of this 50, for me, constant reminder of the fear of Allah. Muhammad sneakily puts in there, and obey His Messenger. So yet again, the 50-50 partnership.
Yeah.
But here you could just have this, you could delete this, right? And the sentences would be shorter, because this doesn't add any value to the statement, right? It's not substantive in the sense of like we have new information that is in some way valuable in this context.
No, but it repeats and emphasizes what it kind of concludes with at the end. Obey Allah and His Messenger. It's yet again, for me, I'm looking at this because it's a repeated pattern through the Quran. Muhammad wants control of these people. Fear Allah, obey me.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly a view you could have as an overall view. And then if we zoom into these surahs and we go, okay, is this like the most accurate, the best version of this surah that we could have? And this part, it doesn't seem to me that mercy is necessary because people are doing what they're doing. So if we deleted that part, just this part that I've got highlighted here, the sentence would lose no value. And in fact, would probably be slightly better in the sense that that's irrelevant, and we could shorten the sentence down and not have that. Just go straight from obey Allah and His Messenger. Indeed, Allah is exalted, mighty, and wise. Although even that's been repeated multiple times. But even if we were charitable and said, okay, let's leave the last bit in, this part seems actually irrelevant to me for people who are doing what they're told.
And what's interesting, what I noticed here too, and I'll put in a Shia perspective as well on this. So when you read earlier, they enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong. That's actually two more pillars in Shia Islam as well, because you have the regular 5 pillars in Shia Islam, but it actually adds 2 more: enjoin what is right and forbid what is wrong. And so it all, according to at least Shia doctrine, it's mentioning at least 4, 5 of the pillars practically. So, that's something that I noticed as well, that this may have been what Shia Islam might have taken from to add to their pillars.
But this is, of course, the problem with this statement is it just demonstrates again that doesn't matter, whether you're enjoining what is right and forbidding what is wrong and doing everything you're supposed to do. You will still at some level be sinning or likely to be sinning, and therefore you require mercy on the day of judgment. So it's a case of that statement then calls into question that you could ever follow this strictly enough. And so you've always got to be wary that you require mercy, even if you're doing everything that a human could possibly do. Then mercy is apparently, according to this genius, still required on the day of judgment.
Oh, yeah. You can drop the whole first part of the sentence.
Oh, and in particular, like there's also this there you hear it in like oral speeches that you shouldn't be proud as well. That's also a sin too, like proud of your achievements, because Allah, the merciful, might change and put you in hell for being proud or vain or something like that. So even like you're kind of like in that state of you're sort of trapped mentally, so to speak.
Well, that doesn't work. Okay. So this is exactly the reason why I left it out, because it doesn't add anything. So I'm just taking the essence of a sentence. I think everybody understands that, and this is what I'm doing. Believers obey, they do right, they pray, they donate. Booms, that's a believer. 72. This is because they do this, they are promised gardens, rivers, mansions, and eternal bliss, if they do that. Now, Prophet, this is a command: firmly fight non-believers and hypocrites. Now, I don't know why you need to fight them, because then it says they will go to hell. So what is the reason that you need to fight them if they're going to go to hell anyway? It doesn't really matter whether you're a non-believer or a hypocrite. So I don't quite understand what this is for.
It's one-way tricky fast tracking.
Yes,
it also like sort of provides the inner enemy or the enemy within. So it provides this propaganda that there's an enemy within and we must dispel this enemy, and it's sort of like trying to like preserve the illusion that, hey, we're going to heaven, but then you have to like not only get rid of the enemy from within, but also make sure, that you will also tell your followers, hey, they will end up in hell.
Yeah. And nobody wants to feel like or be a part of the enemy within. That's the point, isn't it? So it kind of like, if anybody's inclined to go against Muhammad and they're hearing ayah like this, they're more inclined to be subservient and obedient to him, as opposed to have a rebellious heart and act against him when they're hearing stuff like this coming out of his mouth.
And then what is the solution? Well, we see it in sentence number 74. So better repent and you're done. And then in 75, it says, if Allah gives us stuff, then we'll behave. And in 76, it says, well, when he did, in other words, if we get things, we're going to behave. And when he did give us stuff, then we were stingy. And because we were stingy, then they were made hypocrites, because they lied, and they will be like that until doomsday. And now this is important, because don't they know Allah knows all? And this is where it introduces the concept of the unseen. Now, the unseen in Islam is a huge thing. I don't know, anybody who has looked at Islam for more than 15 minutes will know that this is a huge thing. The funny thing is, it is not part of the 6 beliefs, but the unseen is the domain of Allah. This is everything, because they needed to introduce something mysterious, okay, something that nobody can grasp, and which is exclusively something that Allah can do to show how much better, grander, and more capable this God is. So they introduce this mysterious realm of the unseen. Nobody knows what it is. Nobody knows how to define it. Nobody actually has any idea, but they say this is what Allah knows. So this is, and it has its own word, the ghaib. It has different segments. It has a different meaning, because you can have that. It doesn't matter. So there's a whole concept behind this unseen thing, and it becomes quite comical when you start looking at it for longer. Then in 79, Allah will ridicule and punish those who criticize obligatory charity. I don't know where that comes from. It must have been that people were making fun of this, that other people were paying, and they said, why are you paying? Nothing will happen. Well, now they can say, well, hang on, if you don't pay, then you're going to get punished. And so I think this is the only explanation that I have why this sentence is here.
Yeah, this
Then we have-
seems like a scam where you're kind of like
Yeah.
it does seem like a scam where you're trying to get the money out, but you're not, but you're actually going through desperate measures.
Yeah.
And if Allah sees everything, holy crap, man, I can't see the answer to my physics homework. If you can somehow come in and show me the answer, that would be great.
Yeah. Again, that 80, Allah will not forgive them because they disbelieved in Allah and the Messenger. Now, we've seen that, we've had sentences, Allah will forgive everything. But now we're seeing again and again things that Allah will not forgive, like shirk. Allah will not forgive shirk. And Allah will not forgive them because they disbelieved in Allah and the Messenger. So now it's not only the active shirk, in other words, taking partners or other gods next to Allah and the Messenger. Now it's just the sheer or the mere disbelief that will get you into problems. Okay, now if we start with 81.
Should we keep that for next time, Stops?
Because now this is going to go and all this is connected. Because now the next 20 lines or sentences are all connected to each other. Because this is now all about fighting for Allah and what happens if you don't, what happens if you do, and why you should, and things like that. So maybe we should just
let's keep it for next time. Yeah,
keep it for next time and just keep it on from here. Okay.
Cool.
All right. So next. We go to the segment, our favorite segment, which is the theme of the month. Now, last month we had 5 Fridays and we were supposed to have 5 different pillars of Islam, but I was not able to go to one of them, so this is why we are 1 week late. So the final one, the Hajj one, we're going to do today. And, well, actually, there's not so much, okay? What I thought we could do is I found a page which gives you all the different rituals and all the different sort of meanings and stuff like that. And I thought I'm just going to go and share that with you so that we can go through them one by one and then we can discuss them. And if anybody has been on Hajj, then I welcome any kind of comments or any kind of personal experiences that you've made.
I have not. This is the only pillar I have never satisfied in my time of Islam. My father has been to Hajj though, so but mind you, it was a few years ago, and he has some like interesting stories from there.
Okay, so let's just start with this. Okay, we've seen the 5 pillars, and this is the 5th one, which is Hajj, which is the pilgrimage to Mecca, where you have to go and visit Allah in His house, because this is the representation where there is this myth that the house of Allah in heaven is directly above Mecca's Kaaba. Now, if you do the maths and you say, okay, well, if it's 5,000 light years away, then this thing is rotating at 50 times the speed of sound. Now, I don't know how Allah doesn't get dizzy if He's in the house moving at the speed around the Mecca Kaaba. So this is quite strange. Anyway, so you go to Mecca, and does it? I can't remember if it actually explains it, because you go into this Ihram stage. So let's go through it. So what is Hajj? Hajj is one of the fundamental pillars of Islam, annual spiritual experience undertaken by Muslims at least once in their lifetime to express their faith and servitude towards Allah. So what you do is, it means pilgrimage to Mecca, and it must be performed by every Muslim Well, each year during... No, this is wrong. Okay, you only need to do it once. If you want to repeat it, you can also do the Umrah, which is the shortened version, where you don't go through the full ritual of everything. So, and it's the...
And if
Okay,
you do
so you have a...
if you do the
So-
Umrah, you have to complete a Hajj in particular. And you could technically turn your Hajj into an Umrah as well, if situation.
Well, you can do both as well. So it's,
Yeah.
it's quite weird. Why you have this? I mean, this is quite clearly these are the leftovers, the vestigial organs, as it were, of the pagan origins of Islam. Because remember, if you look at the region, if you look at the time, if you look at all this, this was sort of a go-between. It's a cocktail of different ideologies, different beliefs, different gods, different everything. So you still have a lot of these rituals that are left over from the pagans. So this is quite obviously something, this running around the Kaaba 7 times counterclockwise and so on. So this is quite obviously pagan. So you should there show humility, be at peace with yourself, be sincere to Allah. Okay, we're not going to go through these. The thing is that if you, for example, if you die on Hajj, then you're going to go straight to heaven. So the people, I don't know if you heard about all the different calamities that have happened during Hajj, during the times when millions of Muslims all go to Mecca, that you had stampedes, you had all sorts of things happen to people. Thousands have died while on Hajj. And they're quite happy about that because you go straight to heaven. So, steps ahead between it's the last month of the year, and you have all these different things. So the preparation. Okay, so first of all, you start with the intention. All right, so you are told in the Quran you have to go on Hajj, and then you say, okay, now I'm going to go on Hajj. Now you need a lot of money nowadays because you need to buy the visa, you need to fly in. You normally you don't go to Riyadh or something, but you go to the sea, then you're taken by bus inland or something. Then you go to Mecca, and then you go, and let's see if they explained this before. People wish to enter the Haram, move across, they should wear ihram. Okay, good. So in other words, you have to prepare yourself. So number one, you have to go and declare the intention that you want to go on Hajj. Then you have to say, okay, I'm going to be peaceful, I'm going to be a good boy, I'm going to be all sorts of things. And then you need to go and wear different clothes, do different things, and as a preparation, you need to remove all unwanted body hair. People normally shave and do things like that. Women actually are not allowed to wear the hijab or any kind of clothing that will conceal them. This is what they actually should not be doing. But because we are human beings, a lot of them do anyway. But normally they shouldn't, because there is no need to. Because remember, the hijab is there to make the Muslim women known to others that they are Muslims, that they are not slaves who were not allowed to cover up. So there's no reason to cover up, because everybody is supposed to be a Muslim. I mean, there are big signs. And I've been on this highway, and it's quite obvious where they say no one is allowed to enter this. If you want to carry on to the coast, you're welcome to do so, but don't go into Mecca, because you are going to defile it. Your presence is going to defile Mecca, your sheer presence as a non-Muslim. That's how weak Islam is. Okay, just somebody going there is going to do something bad. Okay, so you have the sacred boundary of Mecca, which nobody is allowed to to enter unless you are a Muslim, and you need to now assume a state of ihram. The ihram is a state of piety where you are now focused only on this Hajj, on the rituals, because remember, Islam is just a set of rituals nowadays, and this is where it comes from. Everybody is now going to go and just do this. So what you need to do is you need to You need to wash, and you need to perfume, you need to clip your finger and toenails, trim the moustache, shave. Here we go, the unwanted body hair. And then you need to change of this funny two-piece white ihram sheet, which actually is good because it's supposed to remove all symbols of status. So whether you are rich or poor or something, you always wear the same stuff, and that's actually quite good, I think, so that you don't have any kind of a differentiation. So you can, because a lot of women walk around with these black abayas, for example, and they have a golden Gucci lining and things like that. You don't have this here. In Mecca during Hajj, you don't have this. And men and women should wear flip-flops and sandal and so on and so on, performing. And then now you're starting with prayers and making bow and making movements and doing this and and then rituals. Now, what you need to do is there's 10 things that you need to do during Hajj. So first of all, you need to enter what I say. You assume the state of Iran. That means you're now focusing on this. Then you have to travel to Mina, which is a small place nearby Mecca. And then you need to go to Mount Arafat, and there's different things. This is supposed to reenact the story of the Quran, where Abraham came to Mecca and then went back. He built the Kaaba, traveled 1,000 kilometers back up north, and then Hagar, his slave girl, came, and then she couldn't find water, so she had to go backwards and forwards to get water and look for water. This is always repeated. So there's certain things that the rituals that you have to do, which are significant to somebody who's reading the Quran, and different stories from the Hadith and other stories which are not in the Hadith. And these are just, I don't know, rituals to reenact certain things. Then you have to offer prayers. Then you have to do. So there's so many things you need to do. You need to sit there and meditate, and there's so many things. The worst is this, I think.
The Rami is
the stoning
of the devil.
Okay, you talk this, Mustafa. You know more about this.
So basically, apparently, according to the legend, when Abraham was about to sacrifice, in this version, it's Ishmael, right? He's about to sacrifice Ishmael. So there were 3 positions where the devil appeared in front of, either it was Abraham or if it was in front of his wife or slave girl, either or. Different versions. But in this one, Abraham threw stones at the devil to say, because the devil was stopping him from sacrificing his own son. And then afterwards the sheep came, and this is Ishmael is in this story. He's tied up, bound, and about to be sacrificed. So the stoning of the devil itself, the 3 pillars or 3 stone structures are supposedly where the devil was standing during that almost sacrifice of Ishmael that happened. However, there are scholars, or someone like even J. Smith kind of feels that that's probably Al-Uzza, the 3 daughters, which is Al-Uzza, Manat, and that's the third one. I forget the name, but yeah. So basically, the devil stood in those platforms, or it's the 3 idols.
Okay, and then the worst thing, you need to imagine this. You're stoning the devil.
And apparently he gets hurt when you throw a stone in that position, that he gets hurt, apparently. And what my father even told me is that people don't necessarily just throw pebbles, they even throw their slippers. I wish I was joking. They even throw their slippers at times.
They get quite carried away.
Now,
the thing is that now you need an animal sacrifice, and I just saw the comment with what TDS Dave was saying. The funny thing is there are so many, like, I don't know, what do you want to call them? Rules. They're not laws. They're just rules. Like, for example, if you run around the Kaaba, and now remember, in the old days, women did not wear a lot of clothes. Now, This is like going to a strip club for them. So they got very excited when they saw all these women. So they forgot about the ihram, state of ihram, that they were supposed to be pious. They were supposed to be everything. So, and because they are human beings, you have rules for that. So if you, for example, and it's because it's very explicit. Sharia is very explicit. So in the Sharia, it actually states if a man loses a couple of drops of semen, then he needs to sacrifice a lamb. But if he has a full-on erection and then a full discharge with all the women running around, or maybe even women helping him out, then he needs to go and sacrifice an entire camel. So I hope this is worth it. So there are actually degrees of how much liquid you are allowed to lose while running around in these very loose clothes, accompanied by all these women, and what the punishment is for everything. So this is quite weird.
Before you go on those stops, what's the idea of the animal sacrifice?
Okay, this is the whole point. Now, in the old days, it might have made sense when there were just a couple of people, that not everybody had the possibility to do that. So this was also a sacrifice due to charity. But it became silly if you look at it today and you see how many animals are being killed there for absolutely no reason. And there is so much meat that you cannot ship this everywhere. Because remember, there are millions. So this is why now they're giving virtual vouchers to people which get converted into food packs which are distributed them. So it gets quite practical. So in the old days, it was actually a sacrifice that you need to pay for something, get an animal, and then that you are making a donation to those who go on Hajj who don't have food.
Why kill the animal and not give some wheat or some bread or something else? What's the point of taking a sentient life?
Because it was considered to be more expensive and more of a sacrifice.
For even though the animal obviously doesn't want to die, and presumably Allah doesn't need it. So,
yeah, but Rob, he's pointing it towards the Kaaba and he's reciting the Quran. This must be a very happy animal.
Can I just interject there?
Yeah.
Well, obviously the Jews were sacrificing animals on the Day of Atonement and for other reasons as well in their in Jewish recension, their sinful state as a need for a redeemer. Muhammad obviously had to incorporate that, appealing to the Jews, but clearly didn't understand why the Jews were making that animal sacrifice. That's why there's
no point. Yeah.
That's why there's no historical reference as to why Muhammad or Islam does not understand why these things are taking place. It's very much like the removal of the foreskin, for instance. Why does Islam do that? And so on and so forth. I don't want to digress, but there's an example.
I think the bigger point is it necessary to kill a sentient animal if you have other food? And presumably it's not because somehow, it's going to help you in the Day of Judgment or give you points. Well, maybe it is going to give you points, but then again, that would point to a rather bloodthirsty divine dictator, wouldn't it?
Yeah, but I think he didn't know at the time what was going to happen, that there's going to be millions, yeah.
And not only that, on this day, like Eid al-Adha or the Eid of the sacrifice actually also takes place at the same time around the Muslim world, or around the world, that is. And yeah, apparently it's obligatory to offer a sacrifice on this day for Muslims, whether they're on Hajj or not. So there's
also, of course, we know that it's not the most humane way to take the life of an animal anyway, but It seems unnecessary to take the life, firstly, but secondly, that you are, causing unnecessary suffering. So both of those are, again, a reason to look poorly on this particular practice, but certainly from my point of view.
Yep.
Millions of animals are slaughtered there. Somebody's saying it in the chat. Yeah, every time.
If
you're an animal, you want to get away from any particular Muslim you possibly can over Hajj or towards the end of Hajj, right? You want to find some other place, unless you don't mind or are quite happy to die or whatever the case is, which doesn't seem like any animal does. Their instinct is to avoid pain or potential death or whatever the case is. And sometimes you can kind of see, right, when they notice other animals dying, they can get a sense of it. It's not as if they're completely, blind to other animals doing that. And so, they would, if they could, I'm sure, run a mile or otherwise try and go over and treat, animals of the same species potentially, see if they could save them or whatever the case is. So they do exhibit similar behavior to humans in some ways, at least.
Don't they say that about lambs? Don't show the knife or something like that because it releases the adrenaline and it stiffens up the flesh and makes the flesh. I think it's either harder to cook or gives it a taste, changes the taste and texture of the meat. If it's in a state of fear as you're sacrificing it and then going to eat it, I stand to be corrected, but there is something about that. Maybe somebody in the chat can.
Yeah, it's more so of it being just that stress. It's not good for the other animals around it, because animals do have that sense of smell where they can smell the adrenaline coming off, and it does come in. This is something that we learn when I do go out for hunting and stuff, that like there are certain guidelines where if the animal trusts you and is coming towards you, you let it go. You have to make sure it's happy and all that. And again, you don't want to actually do anything to an animal that is not completely necessary. And I find in a lot of sacrifice practices that not a lot of these are actually practiced. All the animals are put into huge pens and they're slaughtered in front of the other animals. And even if the Quran does show it as humane or whatever, not a lot of places actually practice that.
I guess the bigger question is, why would an animal sacrifice ever be necessary? Because whatever you say, could we then replace this with something else where you don't take a sentient life who presumably does not want to? And I think we've got good reason to think animals don't want to die, a pretty horrific way, sort of midway through their life or whatever the case is. And in fact, they'll try to survive even when they're sick and ill and so forth. So is there some other way that you could accomplish the goal? And if the answer is no, I'd be interested to hear how that would be possible. We will leave that for a Muslim maybe at some point.
You're opening up a very good point here, I think, because the ritual of the stoning of the devil is just plain silly. Right? So it doesn't really do anything, and you can laugh about it. But here, it's different. Here you're actually killing animals, which is, as you say, unnecessary. It is just a part of a stupid ritual. So it's quite sick.
But when you look at, say, the stoning of the devil, it is said to be where Satan stood. If you look at the logistics of that historically, we know Abraham wasn't there. But that to the side, how would anybody be able to see? I mean, who was there in the narrative of Islam where Abraham was sacrificing Ishmael? Who was there present? Because from what I understand, it was just them two alone. How are they able to see a spirit creature, and what made them think to mark the area, thinking at some point in the future that there's going to be some kind of practice that's going to be symbolic of that situation in the first place? And what knowledge did Abraham and Ishmael have to mark the site for, 2,000 years, 3,000 years? That the Muslims will come in later and do some kind of symbolic sacrifice towards that? There's no historical reference in any faith system where they kept that site open.
Yeah, but Sunday, if you start thinking logically, Islam immediately collapses, because why would a devil go and stand there, and why would the devil come back every year and stand there knowing full well it's going to be stoned? I mean, that doesn't make sense, does it?
And it can't be harmed, presumably, anyway. And if it isn't there, then it's just a ritualistic sort of cult practice that actually has no
consequence,
real value other than somebody's subjective opinion about it. It doesn't actually do anything in the world in any true sense of the word.
This is so funny. Anyway, so then you go and what I said just now, you go shave your head or cut a bit of hair off or something. So this is something that you are doing to yourself. Then you run around the Kaaba, and then you repeat the stoning at Mina, and the ritual is repeated by throwing pebbles at two other monuments, because they built three of them. Okay, pilgrims face the main pillar with the Mecca on Mina on the right, stoned with 7 small pebbles while reciting Takbir. Now, look at these rituals. I mean, can anybody tell me that these are not pagan? Of course they are. I mean, what is the origin of this? And look how specific they are, where you need to stand, what should be there, what should be there. this is crazy. You cannot have millions doing the same thing. It does not work. So they got the, I don't know if you've heard about this, they've actually got the Chinese now to run a railway line to transport people between Mina and Mecca, and then going up to Medina. So it's getting like totally like it's a commercial sort of racket. It's a scam. It's exactly what Thunder said earlier. Do you know that the Saudis, the family, because they are the keeper of the two holy cities, Mecca and Medina, they are making more money on this than all of the Disney what do you call them, estates or Disney parks combined.
Yeah, and the thing is, don't the hotel prices go up for that period of time? The hotel prices go up. The food prices go up. The local shops sell their complete supply of bottled camel urine, because one shop guy got arrested for selling his own urine in the bottles. I'm not even taking the piss. I'm not straight. It's a true story. The pun was coming. I mean, thinking clearly knew that was coming. Come on, thinking.
Yeah, and then of course you have Zamzam, which is no longer delivering clean water, so they need to ship in water from the sea, from the desalination plants. So there's a lot of like what is going on behind the scenes. I mean, come on, but Muslims will not see this. They will still believe that this is something that they need to do and everything is above board and everything. It is not. It is not. And then on day 10, you do the final circumambulating, and then you go. And this is like you kiss the Kaaba, or you kiss the black stone. Now, can you believe that during a pandemic that a couple of million people go and kiss the stone and everybody is? I mean, please. This is so silly. Anyway, so there you go. Now, you have different levels, okay? You have people who fly in first class. They go to a 5-star hotel, fully air-conditioned, everything. They have now started air conditioning the entire, this outdoor huge, this gigantic mosque. They have started putting different levels on there because one floor is not enough, so they've now got 3 floors of people so that they can run around the Kaaba, because it's simply not enough. And it's now they've now started air conditioning the entire thing. So you have 5-star flights, 5-star hotels, 5-star but like butler service, 5-star everything, and this is supposed to be a pilgrimage. I mean, come on, the original concept has nothing to do with the commercial attitude that we see today by the Saud family. So,
we see, and yet, the irony is 124,000 prophets have gone into the world. Well, 123,999 minus Muhammad, and not one of them speaks of anything with reference to Abraham, and then Adam, then Abraham, all the way through to Muhammad, with anything to do with the Kaaba and this pilgrimage and the relationship of the earthly Kaaba with the celestial Kaaba. 123,909 prophets, and not one of them mentioned anything about this.
Yeah, and not only that, like even running between Safa and Marwa, originally, what I used to think, and still Muslims believe that, it was the 2 mountains that, Hagar ran in between. But apparently, according to one of the hadiths by Anas bin Malik, he states that this was also a pagan ritual that was adopted into Islam. Like Anas bin Malik, one of the narrators of one of the most authentic hadith books, is practically admitting this, that this was a pagan ritual. And not only that, there's also the even Omar himself, the second caliph, is kissing the black stone and openly admitting that you're nothing but a stone. I'm only kissing you because Muhammad did, and the pagans used to kiss you, but you do not benefit me in any way. Umar is practically also admitting that this was, a previous practice.
It's one of those discussions that the more you analyze Kaaba, or the more you discuss the pilgrimage and Hajj, the more you actually realize from memory and what you were taught, because there's so much about it that things start coming to mind. You've just set my mind off now about walking around it 7 times. Well, why would Muhammad say you have to walk around it 7 times? Why not 9, 10, or 3? And I think it must come from the narrative in the book of Joshua where they walked around Jericho 7 times.
Right.
But unlike Jericho, Muhammad's, the Kaaba's walls are still standing.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
so I'm not sure what's going on there. It's about time those walls came down. Surely, that many people have walked around it that many times. But and another thing about it as well is how many builders that it's had as well over the years. I mean, when you look back through Google Images, for instance, as I've done before, the further back in time you go, the more shanty the actual Kaaba is, like a derelict shed at the bottom of your garden. It isn't this magnificent building that people make it out to be, because I think some people now, they look at the Kaaba when they see images of Hajj, and they take that as that's how it's always been. And that hasn't been the case. The Kaaba has actually been a very derelict building. It's only when the Arab oil money started getting infused in Saudi Arabia that Mecca started to become this plush place and place of pilgrimage that it is now. And Google Images is a good source for that information.
Well, that's why they needed to cover it. So, and by the way, this is most epic. This is a good question. Why is it called haram? Well, it's forbidden. It's the forbidden place. So this is what I was alluding to earlier on, that non-Muslims are forbidden, from going there. That is why it is the forbidden mosque, because it is only there for the Muslims, and this is why over time the usage of forbidden mosque has become the sacred mosque over time. But originally the word haram is forbidden because of exactly this reason.
Yeah, it's Masjid al-Haram. There's another interpretation of that is the fact that the haram was referring to the fact that no one was allowed to be killed there, and this was a place. This was the jurisdiction or the surrounding, the gathering place, the forbidden gathering place where you're not even allowed to kill an animal within that vicinity. So that was the original idea, and then it became, restricting non-Muslims, and that's also how the word haram also evolved.
And holy cow, TJ sings here. No, the 6th pillar we're not going to go. We're looking at the Sunnis.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, just wanted to add one point as well. This reminds me a lot of a generalized practice between any warlord. Because if you look at even Alexander, his entire army had to mutiny. Because after a few years of spending his time in Babylon, after fighting all these wars, he started picking up the pagan Babylonian traditions, or the Macedonian. He quit wearing the Macedonian robes and started wearing the Persian robes and stuff. And I just think, like, when Muhammad was going around, I think he picked up a few of these practices to put into his book, essentially.
Yeah, that's a very good point. That's a fair point. Like even Alexander, yeah, it's a typical behavior of like the warlord, like adopting the beliefs of the existing people, so it doesn't seem that different.
Yeah, because like even the Macedonians saw Persians as beneath them, essentially, and yet that's why they were pissed at Alexander for starting to wear the clothing and stuff.
Well, one of the things that politicians do or kings do is that if they're taken over areas, they'll assimilate some of the cultures and identities of that area or peoples that they've assimilated, because it's a way of appeasing them. We see that with politicians today, for instance, with immigration and such, where they tolerate practices of other religions and faiths, even though they're contrary to the demographic and the indigenous, in order to appease the immigrant. So that happens today as well. It's an old tactic to appease people, to get them on your side.
Yeah, it seems rather interesting that it just proves a bit more that rather than being a prophet, Muhammad was more of a king/warlord type person. Just more proof, in my opinion.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other comments? Anything else that we want to bring up? Because we've covered now all the 5 pillars of Islam, and we see a lot of stuff that doesn't make sense at all in today's world, in today's environment, in today's sort of, I don't know, line of thinking, today's society or culture outside of Arabian Peninsula. Any other comments, questions, or something? Oh, I see Benny Bros here. He's still defending it.
It's just an interesting point here. If you had a choice to be brought into existence and be life today on earth, or never having been brought into existence and you don't exist at all. Now, intuitively, that question, it sounds like it's obvious. But actually, if you look at it, right, it's basically the antenatal position. It's not quite as straightforward as you think. And in fact, the argument against never coming into existence is I think, quite a strong argument by somebody who's pretty damn intelligent from what I can tell. Happens to be a South African, so that maybe I'm biased there, but I obviously was looking at the content of what was being said. And so that's maybe and maybe not for now, but I mean, this Muslim was bringing it up. But would you rather be brought into existence and suffer, or not be brought into existence at all? And you would have you wouldn't lose anything, because you wouldn't know what it was to exist and to have pleasure or suffering. So you wouldn't be missing it. And basically, it's called it's an asymmetrical argument, essentially. I could bring it up and we could talk about it at some point, but it's an interesting point. When I first heard it, I was like, no, that doesn't intuitively sound right. But the more I listened, the more I went, okay, it's not easy to actually argue against it in any rational way that I can see. And this particular person spoke to Sam Harris, he spoke to Jordan Peterson and others, and I was looking for some strong argument against the position, and I actually never really heard it. So just an interesting one we could, I guess, discuss at some other point.
Right. And Thunder, sorry, I muted you because you I don't know why everything was mumbling. Whenever somebody's talking, it was feeding back through your mic. Okay, then I think we're through with the pillars for the theme of the month. Does everybody agree?
I agree.
Yep, sounds good.
Anything else? So then we're good to go. Then let's turn it over to Nick. Nick, you have prepared something on science and the Quran, and you would like to share your view on this. And because you have a scientific background, you have the ability to substantiate a couple of the things. So off you go. Can you share, or are you able? I don't even know.
I think I am able to. Let me just share my screen right now. Hopefully you guys can see what I'm sharing. Yeah.
Excellent.
I can see this. Yeah. So basically, I just want to a bit of background about me. I am a podcaster. Mustafa's a frequent guest. I recently rebranded to a science-based podcast where I spend the first part of my podcast talking about science of various things. My upcoming episode is going to be talking about fermentation, like breads, beer, so on. So I want to present the scientific errors in the Quran today as a special thing after talking to a few people at work. So a bit about me, like I mentioned before, I have an engineering background. I did study biology and chemistry in my engineering class at a university level. I currently work in the computer science, interactive media design space, so web development, machine intelligence, graphic design, and so on. But I also advocate for scientific education. I did do a few things with IEEE, which has many branches for bringing in high school students into the engineering field. So just as a small disclaimer, some of the, in Canada, at least we have a religious freedom. You can practice any religion you want as long as it's not harming a person next to you. But I only advocate that should not come into the place of a scientific research model. Example, if you want to practice Hinduism, read the Bhagavad Gita. You want to do yoga for personal development or exercise. I'm not going to judge you, but you shouldn't be bringing in science, or you shouldn't be bringing in the Bhagavad Gita to start blinding you from any scientific research that you're doing. So before I actually get into some of the things that I want to falsify, I want to make some few definitions clear for the general audience. In science, the definition of theory is different than what our general definition of a theory is. So in common usage, the word theory means a speculative guess. But in science, a theory or a theorem is also known as an axiom. It's almost it's an explanation as to what happens in the natural world. It can be repeatedly tested, and it's verified using the scientific method. Now, a theory is still testable and falsifiable, so it can be disproven. An example of that is Newtonian mechanics. So Newtonian mechanics was a theory. It was a well-proven fact. If you dropped an apple, it was going to fall on the ground. But after a certain point in cosmology, astronomy, and such, it was not actually working, and that's when we modified a theory or found a new theory, falsifying Newtonian mechanics to a certain extent. And we now use general relativity, the theory of general relativity. So just a few more definitions. Theory versus law versus hypothesis. So what we use as theory in a general language is actually a hypothesis. It's a proposition that requires testing. It's just a guess, educated guess. Whereas scientific theories and laws are hypotheses that are actually tested. Both theories and laws are used to make predictions about natural behavior. But the difference is, a theory explains why something works, while a law is just a constraint that describes a behavior. For example, a theory of relativity is just explains why time dilation happens or something like that. Whereas a law, like Newton's three laws of gravity, Newton's three laws, is just saying any force is mass times acceleration or something like that. So laws and theories are almost the same, but like in the essence, that's the main difference between them. So here's just a few examples of theories. All these are, as Zakir Naik would say, because he is a medical doctor, he would say that these are theories and we shouldn't believe them. But let's take the plate tectonics theory. It is verifiable. And if you can disprove that plate tectonics exist, and they're the ones that cause the earthquakes, then you're going to get a Nobel Prize in geology. So there's a few quotes that I want to bring up to disprove, essentially, because they are very anti-scientific. So in the Quran, chapter 7, verse 54, Allah created the heavens and the earth and all that is between them in 6 days. In the Quran, chapter 15, verse 26, we created man from sound in clay and from mud molded into shapes. And in the Quran, chapter 7, verse 189, it is he who created you from a single person and made his mate of like nature in order that he might dwell with her in love. So I chose these three because I can disprove them with three main topics: the age of the universe, the starting of life with abiogenesis, and the theory of evolution. So the age of the universe is actually my specialty in physics. It's something I studied extensively in my engineering studies. So I drew the actual calculations myself. And at the end of the day, these are high school level calculations. If you have taken grade 12 physics, in Canada at least, or in Toronto, you would have learned about these rules. So basically, any distance, it's a known law that time is distance over velocity, or velocity is distance covered in a certain time. So kilometers per hour is a common measurement of velocity. So we know that this is true. We use it every day. And using this, we know that velocity is equal to Hubble constant, which is similar to the gravitational acceleration, 9.8 meters per second squared or something. It's a constant that we have derived in the laboratory. And using that, we are able to actually calculate that the universe is 13.4 billion years old. So I do have an episode planned to actually calculate this in more depth. So if you guys want to check that out, you guys can. But it is tested in a laboratory that we know what the Hubble constant is with redshift. If you want to know how it's actually derived, Hubble's constant is actually, you can actually hear it when an ambulance passes you. That change in sound is Hubble's law, and that law can be also done or tested for light with how stars move as well. It's the exact same law. So the one question that they might ask is, we didn't observe the Earth being made during this time. We're just making an extrapolation using math, the same way the Quran would make an extrapolation, saying that the God created the universe. Well, my extrapolation was proven by mathematics laws and in a laboratory. I can bring you the peer-reviewed sciences and the overall calculations to actually prove this. Now, again, it might be falsifiable. What Allah said in the Quran might be true. God might have stretched the universe at his will, like I would stretch dough or something. But I am willing to bet that mine is more true than what the Quran says, because mine is, I was able to test it myself using the calculations I learned. It's something I can test. So next is abiogenesis. Abiogenesis is just the creation of life. Now, all life is made out of organic molecules. Like wood is a life. It comes from a tree. If you burn it, you get coal. And carbon is life. So any organic molecule is just carbon-carbon bonds, and that makes RNA. That makes us. That makes everything. Anything that is organic is carbon-carbon bonds. And back when the universe started, we were able to see that RNA was made just due to the amount of carbon there were. RNA is in the ribosomes. It's seen as ribosomes in every creature, and it's duplicating, so it can make copies of itself. Because we as humans are more complex organisms also have DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid, but that also derived from ribonucleic acid or RNA. Again, this is a theory. Abiogenesis is a theory. It can be disproven, but it does seem a lot more relevant than the quote saying that Allah made man out of mud and clay. This can be proven in a laboratory where we can actually see the components in ancient Earth with the rocks that we study and so on. It can be proven in many ways. Now, evolution. There's common structures we can actually prove this using common structures between various organisms. For example, let us take mice, humans, and bats. Those are the three examples. We all have the common features, like in our arms, we have the radius and ulna. We have 2 bones in our forearm. We have pectoral muscles that I use for bench press mainly, but mice use for walking around and bats use for flying. And they're strikingly similar in a lot of senses, even though we just use them for different methods. So we have common structures that came from genetically could have came from a common ancestor. Then in microbiology, we can actually see the same 20 amino acids in the nucleotides as any other organism. Now, that means that our genetics had to come from somewhere. One might say, oh, they may come from God. God might have put them there. All right, if you can prove that, you'll get a Nobel Peace Prize. What evolution states is that whatever that initial DNA or RNA organism is, we share the same amino acids. We magically didn't make new DNA or new elements out of that. So therefore, we had to evolve from that single organism. And same thing, we can actually see this in fossil records. So in every layer, of the Earth, there's a separate kind of animal or fossil, and you cannot find current or newer fossils in older sediments. Now, it's commonly said that, that's just because the lower ones are dense and stuff. This has nothing to do with density. It has mostly to do because of time. So the common questions I get is natural selection is based on circular reasoning. The fittest who survive, or the fittest are those who survive, and those who survive are deemed the fittest. Then evolution is unscientific because it is not testable or falsifiable. It makes claims about events that we are not observing and can never be recreated. And if humans are descendants from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? Well, for question 1, I have to say is tigers are extremely fit and extremely strong, but they don't live in plains because they're not equipped to live in a plains. They're designed with their stripes to live in some place like a forest, like in the Bengal area, in India, where they have in the Sundarbans, where they have a lot of trees and stuff. Their stripes are naturally fitted to fight where there's shadows from the trees and such to blend them in. But they would not be able to live in plains where that's not possible. So it's more about adaptability than it is about the strongest living. Question 2. This is a blanket dismissal of evolution because they say that, yeah, you can't test macroevolution. But the thing is, macroevolution is a reasonable extrapolation made from data from microevolution. Microevolution, you can look at the changes within a specific species over time. So changes like speciation in the origin of new species, basically in a lab. You can actually look at cells, plants, fruits, animals tested in laboratories or rats, like rat testing and such, to actually see that if certain conditions are met, microevolution and speciation, it does actually happen. But this can actually be tested with macroevolution, where these same changes that are happening to make speciation in a laboratory are also happening in the fossil records before. So we can clearly extrapolate, saying we can equivocate, saying if this is happening here, then this is also going to happen in the macro level. And question 3 is, we are both primates, we both have vertebrae, and we are both multicellular eukaryotes, meaning we are not the same, we are not descendant from each other, but we have a common ancestor. And a good example of that is, are you a derivation of your cousin? Your cousin and you are extremely similar. You guys have similar ancestors. But to ask if you are derived from your cousin, why does your cousin still exist, is essentially what the third argument is. So that's essentially my presentation, but I just want to spend some time to answer any questions that you guys might have.
If you look at well, first of all, thank you very much for this. Thank you for the work that you put in here, that you are taking time to come here and present this to us. I think that's very nice of you. What made you think of this? Did you stumble across a sentence in the Quran that made you think, hang on, there's something wrong here, or how did this start?
So I have a friend at work who does follow this, and I was tutoring him and such with math and so on, because he is currently studying, and this was actually a discussion that came up between us. So I thought it was best to actually go in, because like my family does follow a lot of things that are religious as well. And just seeing how much there actually is a lack of education with science, and how much religion itself masks the actual scientific movement, I just felt like it was necessary to make a presentation like this and try my best, do my part to educate people.
And have you shown this to other Muslims yet?
I tried. Unfortunately, they didn't take it in a positive light.
Because I was going to ask, what was the reaction?
I think that's to be expected, isn't it? Yeah, great job that. I did want to ask you one thing. I don't know to what degree you have the understanding. Are you a philosophical naturalist or a methodological naturalist, if you know what those are?
I'd say I'm more philosophical, but I would rather not let that. For me, as an engineer, the actual science of something is not really relevant to me as much as actually using that science to do what I need to do for my day-to-day lives. So the actual philosophical side of it, I do believe in it, but just bringing that side into the research is something that I try my best not to.
Okay, I'm thinking more along the lines of, because you did mention that science couldn't prove or disprove. You didn't use the word miracle. I can't remember the word you used towards the beginning. And I was just interested in your thought on that. So if it were the case, for example, I don't know what example we could use. If, for example, we could, in fact, we found out that ants had a particular frequency and they could communicate, and we could find out that they were, in fact, speaking a language to each other that, in fact, some human could understand. Would that, and this is all scientific, would that be evidence in favor of the miracle claim that who was it again that spoke to ants? Moses. Was it Moses? Solomon. There you go. So would that, in your view, would that sort of strengthen the miraculous claim, or would it be it wouldn't phase you one way or the other if we could do that?
Yeah, it wouldn't phase me. I would just believe, oh, that's nice, because we already know ants are extremely social creatures and extremely complex creatures. I would just believe, okay, yeah, they do communicate, they do speak a language. Obviously, we knew that, but this just strengthens that.
Okay, so I guess the bigger point meaning that if there were, in principle, some miracle claim in Islam that we could verify in some precise way in science, would that shift you towards, okay, this is more likely to be a miracle, or would you be of the view that there's nothing that could, in fact, demonstrate or falsify a miracle claim?
Yeah, so I would shift towards the miracle side, because at the end of the day, they are both theories in a scientific definition. It's just scientific one has explanation to it with mathematics or whatever. But if the religious side is able to make an argument on the same level with scientific research and such that proves that miracle actually happened, or that proves that miracle is actually capable of happening, in my opinion, that would actually validate it as well.
Yeah, okay, so I'm of the same view, because there are some people who would never accept that. They'd be the ultimate skeptics and basically say that even if science showed this, that wouldn't prove that Allah was the case. It might be advanced aliens. There would always be some other explanation that they would provide. And I'm sort of in the same camp as you, that if it was something unique to Islam, let's say in this case, and it was highly verifiable by science, I would be more inclined to believe that that's potentially evidence in favor of Allah, as opposed to some unexplained alien or whatever the case is. So I was just interested in what your view was. I think we're of the same, and not everybody is. So I was just interested in what your thoughts were.
Yeah.
Thanks.
That shows in abiogenesis as well, because I did mention that, the extent that we know to is RNA was made in a pool of mineral-rich waters, but if someone told me, it was God that performed the miracle that made RNA form or DNA form, and they were actually able to prove it, it's something I don't mind believing. But till now, I don't know. So
no, that's fine. And I'm not saying that because I know who Rogue is, I'm not saying that that's his view, although maybe he'll say it is his view. That's fine. But somebody could always say something like this, right? It would be evidence, but it could always be explained by something else. And therefore, it's more likely that something else did it rather than Allah or whatever the case is. I'm not of that view, but there are some people that would be of that view. So it would never, or it could never, or virtually almost impossible for it to ever be the case that a miracle could be explained. I'm not of that view, but as I say, some people are. So cool. All right. Thank you so much.
If you go and you look at the duration, have you never had a Muslim say to you, yeah, well, it's 13.8 or 14, whatever billion years, but then we are covering that with our 6 eons or 6, whatever, not days, but time spans. Have you heard apologists say that?
Yeah, I heard them say that. And then again, I have to tell them that an eon is 1,000 years explained in the Quran. I forgot the specific words, but they do say an eon is 1,000 days, and it's still, the math still doesn't count. And I've also heard saying, they say, Earth was made in the last 2 days, and then the universe is 6 days, meaning the 1/3 ratio, and then the universe is 13.7 or 4 whatever years old, and then the Earth is like 4.6, meaning it's still a 1/3 ratio. And I said, well, if you wait 1 billion years, that ratio is going to change. It's going to turn into a fourth. So this math still doesn't add up.
Yeah. So there's no way that you could win.
Yeah.
Have you ever come across anything that you found interesting in the Quran from the scientific point of view? I mean.
Yeah, like the fact that them saying that like washing your hands and such, I find quite interesting in most religions as well, especially in the Quran, and some of it goes into Hinduism as well. With like when you're doing prayer, you have to do something called mudhi, which is cleaning up yourself, and I find this in a lot of religions overall, but specifically in the Quran as well. But I just think that was general knowledge at the time, just to keep yourself clean, which I don't really think is something that is too complex to explain in the scientific world.
Okay. Anyone in the chat have questions? Now is your chance to ask. No, doesn't seem like it. Because normally people are quite curious when it comes to anything scientific in the Quran. But I think you've covered it. So there's not much that you've left open there. Is there anything else that anybody wants to add? Thunderpants, what about you?
No, I'm fine. I think me and Nick would have a heated discussion as to what he claims to be reality and what I claim to be reality. So I'm not going to touch on it in the slightest.
Okay. All right. So there's nothing there. So, well then, Nick, all that remains, thank you very much for this. I thought it was very nice what you did. I would still say that it's better to say a scientific theory explains how something works, not why. I know this is semantics, and I understand fully what you are saying, and I automatically translate it, but you will come across Muslims who will go and to take you up on that and say, no, it doesn't, and there you need to be careful if you do this, just in case.
Yeah, it's definitely something I want to take on as an improvement, but again, like any art theory or something, we know for a fact that science can change. It's something that we believed before as well. Like we had stuff that we believed before, like Newtonian physics that we did change after the evidence was given. So if evidence is given, like I'm more than willing to learn and change my view.
You just said something very interesting, something that makes my toenails curl up, and that is when somebody says science changes. I always think, no, it's not science that changes, it's the conclusions.
Yeah, it's the conclusion. Yeah, that's what I meant to say.
But also, Nick, I'm posting it there in the back chat, so you can see under private chat. There's a link to our Discord server. So if you click on that and join us, you can download the app on your phone or your computer.
I'm already in the Discord group.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
So then you could always join us there, because maybe you and Thunderous can chat afterwards if that's what you want, or because when we finish the show, we all kind of move over there, and sometimes we get a Muslim or two that wants to join us that perhaps is a little bit cautious about coming online. So sometimes we get people to come and chat in Discord, but obviously more than welcome to join us there. So
yeah, I know you guys got an after party channel, so I'll definitely be
I'm
joining.
not sure if it's an after party, but certainly an after show chat. But maybe once Stop Spamming breaks out his whiskey or his beer, then it might be a party, I guess.
Oh, I already had my beer. I needed some alcohol in me before I made this stuff, so it's going to be a party for sure.
All right, sounds good.
No, sorry, I'm still on water. Actually, I'm sipping the last bits of coffee. Okay, ladies, gents, anybody else? Is there anything that we can still cover on in the way of Islam, or should we go to the Hadith of the week and call it a day? Any suggestions?
I think
You mean with regards to the 5 pillars or something else?
Or anything else, yeah. Because the 5 pillars, I think we've left behind. We've finished. We've done this. We covered everything. If there's any other topic that somebody wants covered, if there's a theme of the month that you want to do, otherwise we can go back to critiquing some videos of that. There's always a lot
I was going to ask you.
Crack there.
Maybe we could just discuss as a panel, and Nick is obviously welcome to come anytime. And indeed in the chat, what would people like to see over the next month or months ahead? Is there other particular topics they want us to focus on? Do we want to critique some more videos? And we can definitely find a couple more for Thunderpants as well, where we get these crazy street dawah type things going on with Christians, which makes Thunderous pull his hair out because the Christians seem so meek and mild, almost as if they've been, like acting the part or whatever the case is. And they just
big chaperone giving a script, act stupid. Yeah, we know what they are.
Indeed. So we always get one of those up every now and again as well. We just have to warn Thunderous up front so that he's maybe had a little bit of alcohol or is ready for that, because it's the same thing when we hear perhaps an atheist that sounds like, that they're just blindly accepting everything that's being said. And we're just like wishing that there was some critical thinking that could go on.
Okay. Apart from this being dishonest, they know our voices well enough. I mean, I was on there undercover. Well, not undercover. It was not possible for me to get on under my normal account. So I went there as Fred. And I just had to say, I think, half a sentence. And they already said, "Oh, are you still spamming?"
Yeah, you're infamous. I just listened in for a minute there because I did hear it a moment ago. And again, it's so painful, right? The guy asked a good question. I think it's a really good question. I don't know if you guys agree. He said, how do you determine whether a verse in the Quran is man-made or comes from God? And like Stops and I, because we often review these sort of streams, right? There's the silence for, I don't know, probably 5 or 10 seconds. And because these guys are so scripted and they know, and they sort of jump on each other and they dogpile, which is like if one person doesn't say something, somebody else immediately jumps in to fill the air and to say something and so forth. So there was this uncomfortable silence. And then I think Fareed just said, does somebody want to take this? And then Hamza volunteers Shabir Yusuf, who basically says, well, the first thing that popped into my mind was, well, the questioner should put forward the criteria. When the entire question was, how do you guys, determine whether it's man-made or whether it comes from God, right? A good question, I think, right? How do you determine what's the criteria? But turns it around in the good old Shabir shuffle. But no, you, the questioner, need to give us the criteria. And I just quickly clicked away after that. It was too much for my brain. So I was only there for a few moments, just listening in. But that sort of stuff
obviously
is
didn't understand what was being asked.
I think he understood entirely and didn't have an answer.
So?
And in his typical shuffling way, shifts the goalpost back on the questioner. But once you understand the tactics that these people are using, it's so transparently obvious. If you don't, and it's your first time or you're kind of new to the game, you will fall into the trap. When I first spoke to him, I did that. I thought I was speaking to a intellectually honest interlocutor, and he sort of asked me questions, and I'm like, okay, where are we going here? And now, of course, I know better, not just with him, but with anybody. I'm like, okay, what's the end goal? Let's help get there as quick as possible rather than going around the houses or whatever. Tell me what your end goal is and we'll help you get there. That's something that I've learned to do. So, but that's just an interesting thing. So, just quickly notice that. So maybe we'll do a review on it. It'll either be too painful, but the other thing I said too, because there was a Muslim that was on here suggesting that people go on there or Nick go on there. And I'd caution somebody ahead of time, if you're going to go on there, is that you're going to have 4 or 5 people against one. And as long as Hamza's in control, he will interrupt, he will silence you. You'll have to wait for 3 or 4 people to answer any response you have. You can't possibly respond to all of them. So it is properly set up such that it will preach to their audience, and it's not for an intellectually honest debate. Because again, none of them will venture out of their safe space and come on here, or indeed a neutral platform on a 1-on-1 or 2-on-2. So it'll be a 4 or 5-on-1, and this for them, I guess, is totally fine. But would they come on here with one of them against 4 or 5 of us? Obviously not, but they're quite happy to do it the other way around. So inconsistency or hypocrisy is just another word that I'll let float out there.
Well, and you can see what happens, because somebody like Nadir Ahmed, he is the one who ventures outside of this, and he will go and talk to apostate or somebody, and he regularly gets spanked. And this is what they see. So if somebody does dare do that, it's like it's embarrassing to watch this. I mean, it's cringeworthy to see how badly he gets spanked, and he still says, "Yeah, I won." I mean, even Muslims realize, no, he did not. And that's, I think, what also makes them careful, that they do not go outside of their safety space.
Yeah, there was a debate with him and Apostle Prophet with Aaron Ra on it as well.
As moderator, yeah.
I actually
he got so frustrated.
Yeah, you guys won't. Yeah, I swear to God, I just came off of that video before I joined this live chat.
Yeah, but they're not all as bad as that, right? I mean, he's utterly dogmatic. Doesn't matter what you said. He will, because again, you just, right, it's listening to key phrases, right? They haven't debunked anything. I've debunked everything. Nothing's been said. Everything, the Quran has got all these miracles. So those phrases get repeated over and over. Now, if nobody here is like that, but if you were a gullible person, if you weren't sure, the people's brains are easily, why did that? I was just putting your channel in. There we go. So if anybody, by the way, is interested, there's Nick's channel. I've just put it in the main chat. Do click on that, subscribe, have a look at some of his videos there. I'm sure all of us can learn something. I'll subscribe in a moment. But those sort of things with Nabiya Ahmad, so there's these catchphrases. Like I said, it doesn't matter what you say. There will be a case of, well, he's not debunked anything I've said. I've completely refuted him, and there's all the science in the Quran. And those, if you listen, as you probably did, Nick, those little key phrases will be repeated over and over again, regardless, right? He could be speaking to somebody in a different language. They could be arguing about the moon landings. Whatever it is that's being said, those key phrases will be continually repeated, because obviously, repetition, as we know in Islam, is one way to sort of keep you there and keep the brain focused on not thinking particularly clearly. And so he sort of exudes that. They're not all like that, though. So I wouldn't have a conversation there. I think it's utterly pointless. This is somebody that's so utterly delusional. A, doesn't understand science, but even if he did, and he was presented with something that was irrefutable, he would still find a way to say, no, that's not refuted. You haven't refuted anything. So what would be the point?
One of the biggest things actually... Oh, go ahead.
No, it's okay. I'll keep it in mind.
Yeah, so I was just... one of the biggest things I've actually heard for that is that when we all die, we're going to go meet the Maker, and there's going to be a judgment day. So... if you follow whatever faith whether it be the Quran or Bible, that's when you'll actually go to heaven, or else you'll have an endless time of torment. My main point is, with someone with that mentality, it's very hard to change their mind with scientific evidence, because for them to accept a scientific evidence that's contrary to the Quran means endless time in hell, getting tortured. From what they would say, in my opinion, at least. So just changing their mind, for me, no matter how hard I try, and no matter how much peer-reviewed science I actually show them, it's not going to change their mind.
Yeah. And this was the question that we had, because if we go and critique what Nadir Ahmed said, do we want him on the show while we're doing this? Now, it depends on what level of entertainment we're looking for. If we're looking for like a total embarrassment or something, we can have him here, but then it's just going to be a shouting match, because he's going to say, I didn't really mean that, and because this, and he wasn't able to expand this, and he was talking about something else. So it's going to be sidestepping, it's going to be excuses, it's going to be stupid. So there's no real value in having him here even while we are critiquing his video. With other people, it's different because then you're able to show things. But I think with Nader Ahmed, it's absolutely, totally pointless. That's exactly what everybody is agreeing on, I think.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't do it. It would just be repeated. It's like you could switch off. It doesn't matter. You could be speaking gobbledygook, and there'll be certain key phrases that will reliably be repeated, no matter what information is conveyed. And you can do it once or twice, and it's now been done. You've done it, Stops, and other people. I'd rather have an interlocutor that we can have a nuanced discussion with, where I can learn something, where they will be charitable, where they won't have this level of completely unjustified certainty, especially in their own ignorance as well. It's scraping the bottom of the barrel, and then you'll get Muslims who will accuse you, or other people will accuse you of going after low-hanging fruit, right? Why don't you speak to better people? And we want to. It's just we find that difficult to do. They certainly won't come on here. It's very hard to find them on Discord, and then they'll try and stack a panel like they do with some of these other panels, so that they can't be quote unquote caught out, or whatever the case may be. And most of them can't have any. Maybe Yusuf is the only one, I think, for me at least, where that's possible, that we could have a more nuanced discussion. I wouldn't necessarily agree with him, but at least I think we could have a fair discussion. So he'd be the one guy I'd want to have it. And I have tried on Twitter, and he was busy and so forth, but. Hey, it's all good.
I don't think it's a bad suggestion. I mean, if any,
and maybe you could do it.
I'm always grateful for suggestions. Please, don't let anything.
But I think he could actually do it, because I think you could bring him into Discord or whatever the case is, and do it that way. Where if Stops and I are there, we can just kind of leave or sit quietly or whatever the case is. But to have him on either one of these channels, I mean, I'm quite happy if Stops or Thunderpants or anybody else wanted to do that. I'll probably just stay clear of it. It's just. It's like painful, right? It's like having metaphorical pins and needles in your brain. And I did listen to half of that other one with the Apostate Prophet, and it didn't matter what he, and even Aaron Ra, who was supposed to be the moderator, started to get involved. I think Aaron can't help himself, bless it. He tried to be like a neutral moderator, but at one point he was having a go at Nadir as well. Because he's going to misrepresent you, right? So and Aaron just couldn't handle that, so he jumped in. But to avoid any of that sort of stuff, and there's nothing really gained once you've heard it once or twice anyway.
Okay, then let's jump to the Hadith, and actually I've got two this week because this one is simply too crazy. Okay, Rob, do you read this? I can't because it's silly.
Okay, I'll read this. Anas bin Malik said, "Any of the female slaves of Medina can take hold of the hand of Allah's apostle and take him wherever she wished."
Shame she did drop him in a well.
Can somebody explain this to me?
I think this is any of the female slaves could take hold of the hand of Allah's apostle and take him wherever she wished. Like this is sounding like Muhammad being taken and enjoying himself, or he's at the mercy of the female slave.
The thing is, there's two ways of reading this. Okay, it says any of the female slaves of Medina could. Now, was it saying that he had this opportunity and they could do this, or is he saying any of the female slaves of Medina could, in the sense of they did? They could do it and they did it, or there was an open invitation that they could if they wanted to.
So this sounds like an open invitation, but is there any incident where they did take his hand and take him wherever they wished?
No.
It just seems like it goes against everything we know about him, which is had you have put there, the Prophet could take hold of the hand of any of the slaves and take her wherever he wished. That would sound entirely consistent with everything else we've said. This just goes against everything we understand. So it's like, and this guy just seems to me just made this up, right? Why would we think this to be the case? It's just like, yeah.
Sorry.
No, go for it.
No, I was just going to say maybe because I'm just saying maybe this is a wrong translation. Okay, we need to we can't exclude that possibility.
Because it could be the other way around too. Like an Arabic speaker might be able to, be able to analyze this better.
Okay, and the real one, which is in line with today, which is, I think, in my eyes, even more sick. Whoever performs Hajj for Allah's pleasure and does not do evil or sins, then he will return as if he were born anew. In other words, free from all sins. So if you go and you kill 20 people and rape 50 women, then you go on Hajj and you are free from all sins. Isn't that wonderful?
But then isn't the caveat saying that he performs Hajj for Allah's pleasure and does not do evil or sins? Like, doesn't it add the caveat that he shouldn't do evil or sins in the first place?
Before or after?
Before. Isn't it before?
It doesn't say that.
Because it does say, like, whoever performs Hajj for Allah's pleasure and does not do evil or sins, then he will return as if he were born anew, free from all sins.
Yeah, but if he doesn't do any sins, then there's no point in saying this. It's only if somebody is a sinner, then it makes sense.
Yeah, that could. So basically, Hajj is kind of an escape. Basically, like, if you basically.
Oh boy! But it shows you how difficult this is and how much thinking and doing and interpretation has to go into this. Ladies and gentlemen, Nick, thank you very much for your presentation. That was captivating and interesting. And if you do more of those, like especially if you do like one at a time and then go a little bit deeper, that would be great. If you want, we can. If it's not enough Islam, then you can still join us on Discord. Otherwise, we will see you next Friday. But you're welcome to come on Discord and have a chat.
Yeah, I'm more than happy.
Thank you to the panel. Thank you to the panel. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Randafa. Thank you, Mustafa. Thank you, Rob Speakers. Thank you, Nick. And thank you to the people in the channel who have kept, and I've been watching a couple of things, quite a lively discussion, so that's excellent. So we'll see you later. Good night, everybody. See you latest next Friday. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.